What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff, 3 and Out podcast. How are we doing? What is going on? Subscribe to my podcast wherever you may listen. Amazon AMP, download that bad boy. All the volumes content is on that as well. And if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the page. Leave a comment and share with your friends. A lot coming up football-wise. We got schedule release we will dive deep into. We don't know the schedule yet, but it's coming later this week. But first, do you want to get outside this summer? Do you want to go do something? You should. Get outside your home this spring, this summer. Enjoy the sun. Enjoy a nice, cool night. And do it with my friends at Gametime. You can go to a concert. You can go to a baseball game. You can go to an NHL playoff game. That's inside. You can go to a comedy show. You can do whatever you want. And download the app, the official ticketing app of this show. Promo code John, $20 off. No big deal. Throwing you guys a bone. I don't even need to thank you. Just go take a brother, take a cousin, take your wife, take your mom or dad, and go do something fun. And do it with a little discount from me. So go to your app store, download the Gametime app. You can go to anything you want. Comedy shows, concerts, to games, and use the promo code John, that's my name, John, and get $20 off. NFL schedule release. For a split second on Monday morning, Peter King had reported it was going to get pushed back. And then by about mid-afternoon, West Coast time, Adam Schefter had said, it's on, release Thursday, 5 o'clock. Be there or be square. So clearly, Roger Goodell signed off on everything. The schedule is set. And throughout the week, things will leak. But by Thursday at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, or 8 o'clock for those of you on the East Coast, we will know all of our teams, where they're playing, when they're playing. Obviously, some of it can change a little bit later in the season, but schedule release is a really big deal. Right? The NFL now has figured out a way to dominate the fall, enormous ratings, keep rolling it into after the Super Bowl, combine, free agency, the draft, and then they've thrown this curveball, which is now a massive, massive night in the NFL. And one thing really jumped out to me, and I'll never forget when I first moved to the Bay Area, my first couple years, I got an accountant in downtown San Francisco, which I had no business going to. I was by far the guy's poorest client. I had some friends I went to college with. They were crushing it at the time. I was just, a little old radio host. I wasn't even making $100,000. And this guy, I remember, was really cool. And he would tell me stories about all these guys. He had these W-2 employees working for Facebook and Google that were making like more money than NFL players. But he said the funny thing is he became friends with them and they would talk a big game on Facebook and their Twitter accounts about the way they looked at life. And a lot of that was like, raise taxes. And he said they would walk into my office and they would want every tax loophole, under the sun. They would want to save every penny, which anyone with a brain always does. But he's like, if you look at their Facebook account, that's not the way they're talking. And because a lot of people talk a big game, but they don't live it, right? It's why I don't take 99% of people just publicly, what they say doesn't mean that much to me. It never has. That's why I don't spend that much time getting up in arms about that many things, because I think a lot of stuff is just complete bullshit, just complete. And so when I see the NFL forever talk a big game about safety, I don't think they actually care. They just don't want to get sued and lose a bunch of money, which happened to them over the last decade, right? Do they actually care what happens to these players? I mean, clearly they don't want to lose their star players. But if you go to enough practices, these random guys, they're very replaceable. I mean, that's just a fact. No one wants anyone to get injured, but when you play football, guys are going to get injured. But they are over the top about their discussion of player safety, player safety, player safety. And then it has been reported by Schefter that no longer teams, when I first got in the NFL, Thursday night football there weren't even a full slate of games, right? I think there was like 5 or 6. I remember when I was with the Eagles, we played all 3 years. But by like the third year, I think the majority of teams were played Thursday night football. And then by the middle of the decade, it was a full slate, right? And so these last several years, whether you're Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady or the worst team in the league, you were guaranteed to play on Thursday night football, but only once. And now that rule is teams can play multiple times. Well, clearly Amazon wasn't happy, which kind of a little bit of a head scratcher to me, because one of the things was last year that they had sold their advertising at 11 million people. and between like 9 and 9.5 million people watched it. Like, I understand TNT not being happy with the NBA. They lost half their viewers over the last 6-7 years. So if I think, and I've sold for 2 or 3 million people to watch a game, and then only 700,000 people are watching the game, we have a serious problem. But when you're getting the NFL, and I'm driving 9 to 9.5 million people to you, and you thought 11 were going to be there, I don't think it's that big a deal. But clearly the NFL does. And I don't necessarily think that Amazon is that caught up in the short term, or either the NFL. But big picture, it is inevitable that all this stuff in the next 10 to 20 years is going to be on these streaming platforms, right? The NFL's already pivoted. Who has the NFL package now? Or the NFL, Sunday ticket? YouTube TV, right? Who has Thursday Night Football? Amazon. So they're going above and beyond making these people happy. Well, previously it was like, get the NFL, we're going to bend you over, we're going to get the most money, and it's on you to figure it out. It's kind of what the NBA has done, right? I saw Adam Silver thinks they're going to 3x their next media deal. It's like, bro, your ratings have been in the tank for like 8-9 years. People think I'm an NBA hater. I grew up when the NBA was thriving under Michael Jordan. I've watched the Warriors pull record ratings, but none of the other teams do. The NFL doesn't have that problem. They could put a random game on Thursday Night Football and 9 million people watch. No other league or any other industry on television, including politics, like a presidential debate, can sniff that fucking number. But clearly the NFL is going above and beyond, and like player safety, complete bullshit if you're making multiple teams play multiple Thursday night games. Like, to me, that's kind of crazy. But they're doing that, and that is no longer a rule, and expect that come Thursday. I would say if you're a good team, right, let's just say the top 10 teams in the NFL, and definitely the top needle movers in the NFL, the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Cowboys, now that the Giants are good, the Packers with Rodgers for sure, hell, the New York Jets, right? I mean, these power brands, the Steelers, when you put them on television and the needle moves, the 49ers, these teams, there's a decent chance they're getting multiple Thursday night games, which seems insane to me. It really does. And I think during the NFL owners meetings, David Tepper raised his hand. He's like, I don't have it verbatim. Someone had reported this. Like, I know I'm new here, but why are we that consumed with Amazon? Like, ultimately, it's going to be pretty good for everyone involved. We can't freak out over 1 year. But this is always the issue with football people, coaches, GMs, and the people that run the league. People that run the league, the owners, the league office, only care about cash. I mean, that is first and foremost. Everything else is secondary. Where obviously the GMs and the coaches, all they're consumed with is winning. Well, they don't go hand in hand. Because if all I'm consumed about is how can I make Amazon happy, and hey, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Dak Prescott and Kyle Shanahan and Sirianni and Jalen Hurts, you guys got to play multiple Thursday night games, multiple short rest weeks. Even if we somehow can manipulate it a little bit, you get an early start on Sunday, we'll give you a home game. It seems crazy to me, but that's where we're headed. Because the people consumed with money, they control everything. The teams, the players, the coaches, the GMs, they just don't. Now they profit. They're making a historic amount of money. Being involved in the league as a player, as a coach, as an executive, not like a scout, but as a GM, has never been financially better. But it's also never been more difficult, right? These OTAs, I've been going to these practices forever. They're getting less and less what am I even watching? And obviously training camp is just clearly a different animal than it has been in the past. And I'm not talking like junction boys, no water. I'm just talking about running real practice where you, tackle to the ground. You don't even do any of that anymore because the NFL, player safety. But really, you know why they did that? You know why you get mandatory every 4 days in training camp, a day off? Because that's what the players argued over. You know what the owners and the league office cared about? The money. We'll give you that because we're going to take more money. We'll give you that because we're going to have more juice when we do something like, you know what, Patrick Mahomes, for the next 5 years, you're going to play multiple Thursday night games. And I don't know if that's going to come to fruition, but it's clearly on the table. It's been talked about enough, said enough, that these Thursday night games being a little under 11 million. I would totally understand if Amazon paid all this money and the league, and they thought they were getting 11 million people and 6 million people were watching these games. We have a large discrepancy. But I'm sorry, that discrepancy, especially in year one, doesn't seem that crazy to me. And anyone listening to this for a while, knows where I stand on the whole streaming platform. Like if you don't have Amazon Prime, like I'm sorry, I can't really relate to you. I understand if you don't have YouTube TV or Hulu TV, you will soon. Maybe not in a year, maybe not in 5, but in the next 10 or the next 15, you will. And that's where the league's going to be. So they're clearly pivoting with their mindset, and they just want these guys to be as happy as possible. But I'd also say, like, who is not going to overbid on the NFL? Like, I get back to the NBA because I saw that they want to 3X through their last deal. And I get live rights is very powerful, but your audience is diminished from your last deal. Why are you guaranteed an increase in your revenue? Even if it just stays status quo, which was still a lot of money. You see what these teams in the league is paying out. Like, I understood why the NFL got a huge bump in their last media rights deal. Their ratings keep going up, right? That's just basic math. Now, I just, it seems crazy to me, but we're clearly here. Before we dive into what's next, do you know that Angie's List is now Angie, your home for everything home? And as someone who is currently house shopping and who has bought property before, you walk in, you go, well, I need to fix the kitchen. I want to improve this bathroom. I want to fix some stuff in the backyard. And then you go, well, I don't do this for a living. Where do I even start? Who do I even contact? That's where Angie has 20 years of experience combined with new tools to simplify the process. Over 220,000 pros in their network. They can help you get the best price for your product. They have new projects that are priced upfront and clearly lays out the cost before you buy. With Angie, you can request quotes from multiple pros in your area. The pros in your network are locally based. In just a few taps in the Angie app or click on the site, you can have Angie tackle your home service project from start to finish. Download the free Angie mobile app today or visit Angie.com. That's ANGI.com. Forever, the Green Bay Packers, with Rodgers and Favre, are one of the biggest brands in football. They're not quite, I wouldn't say the Cowboys, but like you put them on national TV, Sunday night, Monday night, you rate, you know? And I do wonder if it's going to come back to earth a little bit this year. So like one of my expectations would be the Packers are getting some primetime games, but I bet it's early in the season. Like to me, I would go like Packers-Bears week 1 Monday Night Football. But I don't feel as confident doing it later in the season as I would have the last 30 plus years. And on the flip side, I forget where I heard this, but I guess it makes sense that the New York Jets have not played on Sunday Night Football in a decade. That's about to change. That's about to seriously change. I would expect them, whether it turns out to be the right move, I would expect the New York Jets to get 4 to 5 non-Thursday night games. You know, several Sundays, multiple Mondays. Because part of that division, it's pretty easy to do matchups that work on prime time, right? You can honestly cross-pollinate the 4 teams, and it works. Miami, New England, now the Jets again, and obviously the Bills. One thing that Peter King alluded to is like 2 teams, for example, the Packers and the Patriots are good examples that are big brands, but might not be playoff teams that also could get pigeonholed into those multiple Thursday night windows, which I keep getting back to think is insane. Like, I just don't understand why Amazon has all the juice right now. Like, to me, the NFL in this relationship, it's relatively new, like doesn't need to bend over hand and fist just to do everything humanly possible to make them feel their best. Like, I'd say it's going pretty well. Maybe I'm out of the loop on that one. 2 teams, I'm going to be let's go the 2 conferences. 2 teams on both conferences, I'm very interested to see how their schedule plays out. Starting with the NFC, everyone's going to pick this team. They're kind of the darling. I think they're pretty good on paper. I've got some people DM me like, I'm a Vikings fan. I'm a Packer fan. You're crazy. I think the Lions, I'm going to pick them. You know, I picked the Packers last year and the Vikings won it, so I'm not claiming to be Nostradamus here. But what the Lions schedule will look like is going to be interesting. Is it start fast? Is it start easy? You know, because there's going to be a lot of pressure on this team. And last year, remember, they started really, really slow. I think they finished their season 8-2, you know, to become a respectable 9-8. But it's going to be a different animal where I don't think you're viewed as like obviously some top 5 team in the league, but people are going to take you seriously. And the Giants are another team that in theory should be right back in the NFC. But let's face it, like even Giants fans would have to admit, like it's very impressive what Daboll did because our roster wasn't that good. Well, your roster isn't that much better a year later. Are they just some lock to be a double-digit win team? Or do they have a season where they're probably still a year away, so maybe you miss the playoffs this year to come back next year to be like an 11-win team? I think it's going to be – we obviously know their division. Their division's really good, probably the best in football, that or the AFC North, right? When you factor in the Eagles are a juggernaut, the Cowboys are damn good, and if Washington's the worst team in your division, you got a really good division. And then on the flip side, I think two teams that are just going to be under an enormous amount of pressure are two teams that have super highly paid quarterbacks. And that first starting in Denver, part of that is the new coach. And it's not, if Russell Wilson can't play anymore, that's not Sean Payton's fault. He didn't create this mess. He didn't make the trade. But I think a lot of people, myself included, are going to be like, well, even if Russell's a little over the hill, it's going to be impossible for him to be as shitty as he was last year because now he has an $18 million coach. He's got a guy that knows what he's doing. And I think the Cleveland Browns, man, you give a guy $230 million, we give you a pass. You get suspended. You've had all these massage therapists after you because self-inflicted. I mean, it wasn't randomly after you. But that is behind everybody now. Well, not behind them, but behind the Browns, behind Watson. Like, they're all looking forward. The contract now kicks in. Are you going to be the real deal? Are you going to be a playoff team? Because that division's pretty hard, right? Obviously, Lamar now is locked up. The Ravens are good. The Bengals are a juggernaut right now, right? They are, you could argue, the second best team in the league behind the Chiefs. And, and the Steelers are going to be a very, very sexy team for people to pick. I bet some people are going to pick them to win the division. Definitely a lot of people, myself included, probably going to pick them to be a wild card team. So the amount of pressure when you're paying these quarterbacks this much money, Denver has this new high-priced coach, Cleveland, really good roster. Like, I'm fascinated to watch the way their two schedules, kind of break down. So it's going to be interesting with these Thursday night teams. Any fan of, it's a cool night, and it's become kind of a league cash cow night to just own. I'm sure there's NBA playoffs. The biggest story of that night will be the NFL schedule release. A situation that I just kind of found funny was the Washington Commanders. Peter King also wrote that, this sale has been a little rocky. It's going to be a pretty ugly divorce. It's not just your seamless, like, hey, you want this car? $20,000. Here's the $20,000. Take my car. Like, this is not going, and it never was going to be with Dan Snyder, some seamless transaction. It was always going to be weird. It was always going to be ugly. And I'll be shocked if there aren't some snags along the way before we get to the final destination. But the story came out, the first I saw of it, I guess we had talked about it last year, that the Commanders, before that they traded for Carson Wentz, they called every single team in the league about their quarterback, including Mahomes. So they were going quarterback shopping, and they were willing to do whatever it took to get a top quarterback. Most teams with good quarterbacks obviously hung up and ended up with Carson Wentz. But one of the stories that came out about that, I just saw this because Irsay tweeted about it, that they contacted Andrew Luck. And honestly, the first time I heard about it, I just kind of laughed. Like, when you called Andrew Luck, a guy that retired because he was often banged up and the injuries he just couldn't take anymore. He hated rehab, don't blame him, and was just like, I'm done. Well, these people, Ron and Martin Mayhew, work in the NFL, right? So they know the rules. It's not like he's just out there like some free agent like Tom Brady. To call, hey, would you be interested? So it's not just, would you be interested? It's like, hey, man, we would have to trade the Colts for you. And would you want to come play for us in Washington? I kind of laughed because, not because it was tampering. Like, that's just, I don't believe that Washington should have to give up some pick over that. But it's also kind of just, how dumb are you? Right? Like, you think Andrew Luck, if he was going to come back, wouldn't he just go back to the Colts? Why would he want to come to, of all teams, your squad that has been, let's face it, pretty shitty for a long period of time? And then Irsay's tweeting that it's tampering. And I've read a couple people that are like, I think the Colts are going to try to pursue this. Maybe, Dan Snyder forced them to do it as kind of an FU to the league, didn't really care if he got in trouble. I don't know. But we can't rid ourselves of this guy quickly enough, because this is a franchise that, if they were good, it'd be a lot of fun. They showed some signs of life the last couple of years, and it's been enjoyable. But to me, as long as he's around, it's kind of this dark cloud, and this notion that it's some lock to just be done. I bet if you ask most people who follow the NFL, it's like, oh, Dan Snyder's already gone. I'm like, are we sure? Like, are we totally sure Dan Snyder's gone by this fall? I mean, I think so, but we all know Dan Snyder's kind. Most of us know that guy with a lot less money. One thing they are is they're petty. They're vindictive. They don't just go without a fight. So whether you're worth $100 or, $10 billion, that mindset and that wiring does not change. And we know this guy, man, is going to make it very, very ugly before it's all over. One story that came out from a podcast, the Action Network, is where Sobel works, that comes on the golf podcast. My guy Stuckey, gambling, and they got guys that, are locked into the gambling circle. And I guess one of their guys said on a podcast that the Atlanta Falcons, and this would make sense, that Arthur Smith went sniffing around to see if they could get Ryan Tannehill this offseason. And whatever reason around the draft, the deal didn't go through. Now, in fairness, like the Titans, you weren't going to move on from Tannehill before you knew you got a quarterback, and then you get Levis in the second round. You might as well just write out Tannehill until you see Levis can play. What are you really going to get for Tannehill that makes sense giving him up? The other guy that they sniffed around was Kyler Murray. Now, the hard part about Kyler Murray is twofold. One, he is under a gigantic contract, and the other, he currently has a torn ACL. So whatever you were going to trade the guy, if you are willing to, and of course they have a new general manager and new coach, you would examine every option and every potential ability to improve your team. You would get, at best, 50 cents on the dollar for Kyler Murray. And whatever you want to say about Kyler Murray, I'm not the biggest fan. When a year ago, even after that devastating loss to the Rams, coming into the season, if Kyler Murray did not have that gigantic contract, you easily could have got like a 1 and a 2, a couple ones. Shit, the Commanders, a lot of teams would have traded for him. So he's hindered by multiple things now. I also think that it would behoove the Arizona Cardinals to not sit, and clearly he's not really tradable now, but I think they could potentially benefit from it, because if he comes back next year and he's healthy and he just looks capable again, because there were moments this year before he tore his ACL, he does look capable. And if you're a coach, and most of these coaches have inflated egos and believe they can save people, his talent is not really debatable. He is one of the fastest players in the league. He's got an enormous arm. When he's rolling, he can look like a top 6-7 quarterback in the league. So what if he comes back this year in the second half of the season, he just looks solid? Then to me in the offseason, because the Cardinals have two things going for them. One, they're going to suck, meaning they're going to draft very high. They also have the Texans pick, who might not draft 1 or 2 again, but more than likely they're closer to 10 than they are 20. So you're going to have 2 picks really high. It's viewed as a really good quarterback draft. Hell, next year in general, I was reading something. The top 5 players going into next season in college would be the top 5 players that were just drafted in this draft. They are better than every single player in this draft. The only 2 players, honestly, that went in the top 10 that would be considered with Caleb Williams, Marvin Harrison Jr., Brock Bowers, Drake May. I don't know how to say his name, but the offensive tackle for Penn State, which would have easily been a top 3 or 4 pick in this draft, that would be in their category would be Jalen Carter, who we all acknowledge was the best player in this draft, but had major character concerns, and then Bijan Robinson, who's a running back, so he just can't go that high, and he still went 8. So this draft coming in is absolutely loaded. So if Kyler Murray comes back, he plays just decent. You don't even need to win the games, but he just looks healthy. You get some momentum going. You go, okay, this is a capable guy. You can either do 2 things. You can build around him because you might be stuck. It might be hard to trade that contract. Or if he just looks good enough, there are always teams where it's like, especially if you go, hey, he's bought in, he's being a good guy. You just talk up his character. He's studying, and he's going to have time to really talk up, like, how's he acting when he's rehabbing? Is he studying? Is he around the OTAs? Is he going to all the meetings? Because if he's doing that, I actually think you could rebuild his value again. He's never going to be viewed, at least in the next 12 months, as some star player again. I'm not saying he can't get back to that. I would bet against it. But yeah, I don't, when you're that talented, like ultimately there are some guys, Baker Mayfield, even Trey Lance has some fundamental flaws the way he throws the football that just he's not even nearly as fast as Kyler. Like they don't have the capability of being that good. So I would bet against it, but the capability is there. A lot of guys like Zach Wilson can't complete a out route. He skips wheel routes to running backs. There's just fundamental layups in the passing game he can't complete against NFL players. We all watched it last year. It was crazy to watch because he was a guy that Chris Sims a couple years ago was like, this guy could be Aaron Rodgers. And when you just watch him fling it on air or whatever, you're like, that is an elite arm, great release, powerful, like he's got it all. And then he actually has to play. And then you're like, what the hell is this? And by middle of last season, they're like, Mike White. And I don't even blame him because you watch Zach Wilson, you can't even function with the guy. So I do expect, let me rephrase that. I do think it's going to work out for Arizona in the sense of trading him right now for absolutely nothing doesn't make that much sense because once you sign a contract of that magnitude, as we've seen with Aaron Rodgers, it impacts your cap in the short term. And there's a chance that maybe that's the best you can do. And he comes back, he's healthy, you use those 2 picks, you draft Marvin Harrison, you draft the offensive tackle from Penn State, and you surround him with some more talent and you take your chances for the next couple of years. Now, I never would have signed him to the contract in the first place, but either way, you know, because there is 50-50 seems high, but I would say there's a 25-30% chance this team drafts number 1 overall. Most people universally agree that this is the worst roster right now in the NFL. This is not debating, this is the worst roster in the NFL. A lot of people thought that last year with the Giants. The difference is we all knew Brian Daboll, what this guy's done in Buffalo was incredible. I think most of us go, Jonathan Gannon. I've had people tell me that were around Jonathan Gannon. I actually think he's better suited to be a head coach than he is a coordinator. He's a much better leader than he is some schemer. So it's whenever you hear that, you go, well, we'll see. We'll see. It's a little cheesy for me, but listen, I thought Sean McVay, I remember when he was hired, I was like, no one my age is going to come into the league and just kick ass and take names at 31 years old. He did, and he was been awesome. I bet against that one. So I've been wrong before, but I would say Jonathan Gannon, I would short that stock. And a large part of that is just the talent around him, the organization, a lot of turmoil. He's getting sued by former employees, people coming after his owner. Could just be a weird place. Quarterback's injured, but we'll see how that all shakes out.